on, Nell.
Before we begin, I just want to let you know that throughout this episode there will be sexual references. There will also be descriptions of AIDS-related illness and death, right from the start.
One of my very closest friends, Paul, his family were in Newcastle. He was from Newcastle. He knew his sister, but he didn't get on well with the rest of his family. They kind of rejected him. He decided to give up the medication. It wasn't working. He wasn't eating, which basically meant he had a week left. And he said the only person he wanted to see was me. So I spent that week by his bedside. And his sister came for the last 2 days. He didn't want any friends to come, but of course they did. And I would say he's not happy about seeing people, but he's asleep at the moment. So if you're quiet, so we go and sit there. Of course, inevitably, he wakes up and he looks around and looked at me and said, "Oh, God." I said, "They've come to be with you." Okay. But in the last day, I couldn't let them go in. He was in such a state. Because his body was breaking down, and they were giving him morphine. And he just disappeared. And when he passed, they rushed us out of the room. He was in a private room. He was that bad. And we were out there for 10 minutes, and we went in. And I don't know what they'd done, but they put a little white coat on him, and he looked like he was with the angels. He looked at rest. He looked like a different person. And I said, "Oh my God, he's gone." And he's just, look at him. And of course, I just collapsed. All the tears that had been building up, which I'd kept at bay. I spent the whole of I didn't go into rehearsal. It was a Saturday night. And I rang on Sunday, I can't come into rehearsal today. I just can't stop crying. You're listening to Sing It Pink, the story of the Pink Singers, London and Europe's oldest LGBTQ+ choir. I'm Philip, a tenor, and for episode 2, I'll be your guide. I first joined the choir in 1987, 37 years ago. It's hard to believe that such a long amount of time has passed since then. And my goodness, I've seen so much during those years. There have been many changes for LGBTQ+ people, both within wider society and for the Pink Singers too. But hey, I'm still here. The only difference now is that I've sort of taken on the role of the Pink Singers' granddad and resident choir historian. It's an honour that I wear proudly. In this episode, I'm going to do my best to talk you through one of the more difficult periods in our history, the AIDS epidemic in the UK. You've just heard me remembering my friend Paul, who we lost to an AIDS-related illness in 1988. I should say that talking you through this will be difficult. It's hard for anybody who was there to remember this time, but despite this, I know how important it is that I share this story with you. It's a key part of the choir's history, and my own too. I lived through it. Before we get into it all, though, I want to provide some context so that you can understand more about what was happening before the AIDS epidemic arrived. In 1967, the partial decriminalisation of homosexuality passed in England. So, as we entered the new decade of the 70s, it was no longer illegal for two men aged 21 or over to have sex in private. Despite these new legal freedoms, public attitudes remained damning. And if anything, police action ramped up. They continued to harass men who they suspected of being gay. British society was entrenched in a deep homophobia. Let's go back there to 1970. October 1970. Age 22, I started a course at the London School of Economics. I'd already explored my sexuality after seeing two flamboyant queens walking into a gay bar in Earl's Court. I decided to follow them in, and the rest, as they say, is history. Later, I was in the university canteen when I saw a poster on the wall that said,
"Come out. Join the sisters and brothers of the Gay Liberation Front."
Now, in those days, the word gay was not in use. People like me were either queer or homosexual. And this poster featured a photograph of men and women all dressed a bit like hippies. I thought to myself, is this what I think it is? Are they like me? So I went along to the first ever Gay Liberation Front meeting. There were 19 of us there. And I realised, yes, these people are all queer. I've come home. We were seen by the church as sinners, by doctors as sick, and by the police as perverts and criminals. So we knew that if we were going to achieve gay liberation, we had to encourage people to love themselves. The first thing we did as part of the GLF was to say, gay is good. We also had a list of demands. They were handwritten onto our leaflets, then photocopied and distributed far and wide in our manifesto.
Discrimination against gay people by the law, employers, and by society should end.
Those attracted to their own sex should be taught that it's normal to do so.
Sex education should not be exclusively heterosexual.
Psychiatrists must stop treating homosexuality as a sickness.
Police harassment of gay people must end.
Employer discrimination against gay people must end.
Gay people should be allowed to contact other gay people through ads, on the street, and any means they wish to.
Gay people should be allowed and feel free to kiss and hold hands in public.
The age of consent for gay males should be reduced to 16.
As far as we were concerned, it was the start of a revolution. We published our Gay Liberation Front manifesto, held weekly meetings of up to 300 people, disrupted religious conferences, and co-organised the first Pride March. Elsewhere in London, my friend and longest ever serving pink singer, the bass, Michael Derrick, had joined the campaign for homosexual equality, the Che. Unlike the GLF, who preferred direct action and radical gay pride, the Che were more focused on achieving legal and social equality.
Campaigning work and political work, met my MP and talked to him about gay rights and encouraged him to support them.
Alongside lobbying, Michael was also trying to get the less politically minded lesbian and gay men to join the fight. One night he visited a gay pub in the popular Earl's Court area and enacted some rather daring recruitment methods.
There was a cruising area around the back of the pub. It's where men cruised up and down. If they didn't pick up anybody in the pub, they would go in. It was just an ordinary street, you know. And I just walked along the street and men were kind of doing various things in pairs. And I would just pop a leaflet into their back pocket and move on, or walk up to them and they'd think that I would be saying hello and I'd just hand them a leaflet. They'd look a bit startled.
Despite the granting of some homosexual freedoms in 1967, police raids on gay spaces and bars continued throughout the 70s and then into the early 80s.
They could say that they found drugs on you and you'd have to appear in court. The local newspaper would simply say, this man, full name, full address, arrested for gross indecency.
As well as gay raids disguised as drug busts, we also had to be on the lookout for pretty policemen.
We'd like to dedicate this one to the Earls Court Pretty Police and all the people that have got to know them rather better.
These were plainclothes coppers dressed in torn, tight jeans and leather jackets, who might chat you up and then arrest you for impotooning, which could be offering sex, talking about it, or even something as simple as giving a lingering look. The Pinkies cheekily poked fun at these pretty police encounters by doing their own version of Burt Camford and Frank Sinatra's 1966 hit, Strangers in the Night. These pretty police posed a significant threat. Michael had his own way of vetting his potential partners.
If you met somebody you fancied, you didn't say, oh, shall we have sex? You didn't do that. You'd have to go through a number of stages first. There's a script to follow. There's a kind of, hello, have I seen you before here? Where do you usually go to? That's a very good question. And then you find out if they can say a string of gay places. Oh, which do you like? What do you like there? And then you ask them where they live. And then you invite them back for coffee. You don't say, come back to my place and have sex. You invite them for a cup of coffee. Oh, actually, there's a bottle of wine I need finishing off. Let's go back. Come back to my place, you see.
As we reached the 80s, legal rights remained unequal. The age of sexual consent, which was 16 for a man and a woman, remained fixed at 21 for two men who wanted to have sex. Now, where were the Pinkies? It's 1984, and the Pink Singers have just celebrated their first Christmas together. Throughout the week, you might find them getting down to high energy or disco music at the nightclub, dancing with Divine at the Hippodrome, or simply doing a post-rehearsal waltz at a Sunday tea dance in Soho. There was something to do nearly every day and night of the week, but very much in an underground sort of way. Out in the mainstream, Bronski Beat, an openly gay band, had just reached number 3 in the charts with their hit, Small Town Boy. They were about to record an album called The Age of Consent, in protest of the government's unequal gay sex policy. And after spotting the Pink Singers performing at the Bell, a popular LGBTQ+ community venue in King's Cross, Bronski Beat wanted the choir to sing backing vocals on a couple of select tracks.
It was hot singing, leaving persistent memories of sweat on the synthesizer keys that I used to lay out the arrangement.
The producer, Mike Thorne, wrote these session notes. They record how the Pinkies rolled up to the studio on this hot summer night and crammed into a small recording room before arguing over who got to wear the best headphones.
An evening of this melts you. The only problem was that the air conditioning had failed completely, so many of us worked topless.
Sweating and half naked, the Pinkies began to lay the backing vocals for Bronski Beat's 1984 version of I Feel Love, originally recorded by Donna Summer in 1977. If you listen, it sounds like there's a lot of Pinkies in the studio, but only a handful of the choir members could make it. Mike Thorne used production techniques to make the choir's voices sound fuller.
For the harmonies, they'd all sing one line, and then I'd cue the start from the piano. This way, 20 became 100. I broke out the champagne I'd sneaked in. We might be an odd collection of differing misfits, and the juice didn't go far, But after all, it was showbiz, and ceremony is important.
Against the backdrop of a deeply homophobic Britain, the Pinkies were feeling optimistic. Here they were, a gay choir, emboldened and singing together on a mainstream record, and taking a political stand against the age of sexual consent while doing it. They were trying to live freely while hoping that the rest of the 1980s would hold liberation. But there were darker days just around the corner.
What is AIDS? The healthy human body contains certain natural defences against illness. Special white blood cells can track down infections in the bloodstream and render them harmless. The person with AIDS, acquired immune deficiency syndrome, suffers from a shortage of these protective white blood cells. If an infection then enters the bloodstream, it meets with lower resistance from the blood, and the AIDS sufferer may be unable to fight off the illness. Capital Gay.
In July 1982, Terry Higgins was one of the first people in the UK to die as a result of an AIDS-related illness. Terry had developed a rash the year before, and though doctors hadn't thought much of it, he had started to feel unwell. A keen DJ, Terry had made many trips to New York to buy records and dance with new friends. But while playing his music at Heaven nightclub back in London, Terry collapsed and passed away shortly after.
In New York, this is Greenwich Village. Centered in and around Christopher Street, on the west side of this traditionally bohemian district of Manhattan, is a vast community of gay men, said to be hundreds of thousands. Here, the killer disease has taken its greatest toll of death and of fear among those who walk in its shadow.
An epidemic had been unfolding across America throughout 1981 and 82. Hundreds of gay men were among those who died as a result of the illness. As highlighted in the BBC Horizon episode Killer in the Village, first broadcast in April 1983. Cases of AIDS had started to appear in London, mostly in gay men who were falling ill, just like Terry. As infections of HIV, the virus that leads to AIDS, multiplied, the number of deaths rose. People were desperate for information. They swamped charity helplines, including the one operated by the recently opened Terence Higgins Trust, a charity formed in Terry's name to help those suffering with AIDS.
The line is engaged right through the day as people try to ring with their questions. And the near panic, which sensational press headlines have induced in the past couple of weeks, has only added to the strain on the Trust's resources.
The tabloids were printing headlines such as
Britain threatened by gay virus plague.
AIDS victims face forced quarantine.
The focus from the mainstream press ensured that already present homophobia within society intensified. Gay men were villainized and blamed for their sexuality, as if AIDS was their punishment. Rosa McCormack, a former Pink singer, remembers this time.
One of my friends who wasn't in the choir, his name was Adrian. He was a partner with a guy called Barry, and they were together for years. At the end, when Adrian became too ill and he was in hospital, one of the things he was asking was, why me? And his partner Barry was saying things to him like, "You did nothing wrong." Sorry. Because one of the things that were being said at the time was, this is your retribution, God's retribution on you. This is, you've got AIDS because it's a punishment because of your abomination, And Adrian wanted to know what he'd done, And Barry was trying to say to him, "You've done nothing wrong. You've done nothing wrong."
While information remained sparse, The Pink Singers co-founder, writer and LGBTQ plus activist Brian Kennedy wrote in capital Gay.
For long enough, we have all been talking about whether the gay lifestyle is to blame. There has undoubtedly been a lot of anti-sex, anti-drugs feeling surfacing, both in and outside the gay community, misdirecting us from where the true focus of our attention should be, the pace and the quality of the medical research, which will in the end have to come up with a few answers. And this research must proceed fast before it becomes as big a killer in Britain as it has in the States. Senior nurses have warned the government that London hospitals urgently need more money and staff to handle the increasing numbers of AIDS patients. Capital Gay.
Research progress was slow and underfunded, and though the doctors and nurses on the ground were doing their utmost best, they received no additional support. There was no cure, nor effective treatment. Testing positive for HIV, the virus that can lead to AIDS, became the equivalent of receiving a death sentence. By 1985, just 1 year after recording the Bronski Beat tracks, the Pink Singers celebrated their Christmas concert with a benefit for the Terence Higgins Trust. That night, they sang their version of Some Enchanted Evening, composed in 1949 by Richard Rodgers, with original lyrics by Oscar Hammerstein. Those words, "You may hear him laughing," the sound of his laughter, were adapted by the Pink Singers to focus on him, not her. They spoke of a long-forgotten, freer, easier time. Enchanted evenings were hard to come by now, as anxiety ran riot, with more members of the community receiving positive diagnoses. By October 1985, there were 241 reported cases, with the number of deaths at 134 and rising. With very limited support from the government, the community was doing its best to hold it all together.
What we need now in the gay community is a more collective approach to our survival. In relation to the physical dangers that we face from AIDS, the collective process has already begun to have an impact, particularly through the work of the Terence Higgins Trust and the London Gay Switchboard.
Bob Cant, a Scottish LGBTQ plus activist and journalist, wrote in the London listings magazine City Limits in 1985. He stressed the importance of the community standing strong together in the face of the epidemic. But what was just as important, Bob said, was for the community to rise against the horrific and dehumanizing representation of gay people in the press.
The language of the media, particularly in terms like gay plague, reinforces anti-gay prejudices and stimulates new public outbursts of homophobia. It is difficult to resist their abuse individually, but we can resist it as a group by continuing to advertise the places where we enjoy ourselves, by participating in our local lesbian and gay groups in those parts of London where there are no gay meeting places, by developing cultural activities such as the Pink Singers, video production, theatre groups, by joining self-defence groups. All these activities are visible and show others, whatever their sexuality, that the gay community is strong, caring, creative, and not ashamed. "1988. I had been with the Pink Singers for a year.
I had lost my friend Paul, who you heard me talk about at the beginning of the episode. The Pinkies helped me recover from such a devastating loss. Throughout the years between 85 and 88, we saw AIDS-specific hospital wards and hospices spring up in London. Places like the Mildmay in Shoreditch, the Broderick ward at the Middlesex Hospital, and the landmark AIDS Centre in Tulse Hill. And in spaces like these, the Pink Singers answered Bob Cant's call to come together. We knew that by singing, we could support the people who were suffering. The Thomas Macaulay ward at St Stephen's Hospital on Fulham Road was one such space. In December of 1988, the Pink Singers performed there as part of a Christmas celebration. But we weren't alone on this festive party lineup, as Capital Gay reported.
West End stars in Secret Hospital Visit. Millicent Martin and cast members from Follies, Cats, Brigadoon and Phantom of the Opera dropped in to sing to patients on the Thomas Macaulay ward at St Stephen's, the hospital's HIV ward.
Simply uplifting. Singers from the top shows. Hearing those voices so close.
Was how Alan Metcalf of St Stephen's described the experience. 100 of the ward's patients, ex-patients, friends and families gathered for a happy Friday that started with the visit of the West End performers and ended with carols and a party that featured well-known entertainers from the gay scene.
Well-known entertainers from the gay scene indeed.
Once I loved such a shattering physician, quite the best-looking doctor in the state. He looked after my physical condition, and his bedside manner was great.
I did a version of Cole Porter's 1933 song The Physician, which is all about a patient who falls terribly in love with their wonderful doctor. It felt apt for that occasion. And this is the thing, we had to laugh. We needed to keep people cheerful and happy. We needed to give them a moment to just forget their illness and to forget the resulting rejection they might have felt from their family, their friends, their workplaces, society as a whole. We needed to provide respite. And amongst our repertoire, the comedy in Cole Porter's song sure allowed us to do that.
Why, he loved every part of me, and yet not me as a whole. With my esophagus he was ravished, enthusiastic to a degree. He said was just enormous, my appendix vermiformis, but he never said he loved me.
In 1990, the Pink Singers began our association with the London Lighthouse, a hospice in Ladbroke Grove for people living with AIDS. The Lighthouse was a place people could go to for a break or during the last few days of their lives. It had an inpatient ward, counsellors, a remembrance garden, and a restaurant. The restaurant was taken over by a group called Food Chain, who made meals for people with AIDS. So on Sunday, there was a whole team of people that got in their vans and took these meals out into the community, all prepared in the London Lighthouse kitchen. The Pinkies raised awareness and money for the hospice. We gave our first performance there in 1991, and for a while, the Lighthouse became our home for rehearsals too. Rosa remembers some of these Sunday morning practices.
To actually sing there was a privilege, and sometimes the guys would come down from the ward, you know, and just, if we were rehearsing, and just sit at the back quietly and just listen or watch us singing. And it was nice to see them. And then we used to do concerts for them. It was a lovely environment to be in. The nurses that worked there were caring, they were hardworking, they were dedicated, they were compassionate.
I spent a lot of time at the London Lighthouse too. I revisited some of these memories when we were doing some initial recording for this podcast. When you came to the glass doors, on your left was a big reception desk, and at the end of that they would light candles for the people that had been there and had passed on. And so occasionally people that you knew or would come to the concerts or that you'd had a cup of tea with, you'd go in and the receptionist would say, David left us this week. That's his candle. So you always went in and you always just looked over there to see what was happening. And some weeks there would be one candle or none, and other weeks you'd have half a dozen. As the 90s rolled on, there were greater advancements in healthcare and awareness, and public attitudes became more empathetic. People also began to understand more about the transmission of HIV and AIDS. Though gay men were greatly impacted, many other people tested positive too, including a significant number of women. As well as supporting hospices and wards, which seemed to be inundated with gay men, the Pinkies also raised money for Positively Women, a charity supporting women who had tested HIV positive. Still, much of this progression was too late for many of those diagnosed with AIDS who had already passed away, those who had left us without sufficient medical intervention, and those who had been ever aware of the homophobic attitudes pervading society. This included Gerard Windle, the Pink singer and Brixton-based activist that you heard about in episode 1. He passed away in '93, aged just 36. There was also Vaughan Williams, a professional actor and Pinky who passed away in 1990 at the age of 31. And there was also Brian Kennedy, the writer, activist and Pink Singers co-founder who was so fundamental in setting up the choir. He was dedicated to supporting the LGBTQ+ community and shared valuable information throughout the AIDS epidemic. You heard some of his writings in Capital Gay a little earlier on. His fellow co-founder, Mark Bunyan, remembers hearing the news of Brian's passing from his partner, Andrew.
I was sitting there, the phone rang. Andrew said, I've just read Brian Kennedy's obituary in the Guardian. And I said, oh, who of? And he said, no, it's Brian's obituary. He was one of the people who just suddenly weren't there. And then, I didn't realise he'd developed the illness. Sorry. He was just the loveliest man you could want to meet.
It was also too late for the Pink singer Steve Aliff, who passed away in 1991, aged 35. Steve was a beautiful singer and dancer. He had been performing in the stage musical Me and My Girl at the Adelphi Theatre on the West End when he'd fallen ill.
It's me, I'm wearing a pink T-shirt. Tim is wearing a yellow T-shirt, and next to him is Jan. And the reason that we three are singing together is because we wrote a song for Steve.
Rosa is watching a video from the Pink Singers archive of her with fellow Pinkies Tim and Jan.
It was very emotional, and I remember singing that song with Tim and Jan, and we wrote it together, and we performed it at the London Lighthouse. It was just after we found out that Steve had died, and I had no idea that he was that ill.
Rosa had been at a rehearsal, and as she was leaving, she said, "I'll see you next time, Steve."
And he just said to me, I wish. I didn't get it. And then after the summer, when he didn't turn up, and I said, oh, anybody seen Steve? And then they told me Steve died, and I was shocked, but I didn't know he was that ill. You know, he was a nice person. He was a good person, and he was way too young to die.
And I recall what he would say if he ever got a chance. Yes, we imagine what he would say if he ever got
Though the members of the Pink Singers suffered huge loss, we did our best to plough on. We knew we could sing to warm spirits and bring a laugh to somebody in their darkest moments. We had always tried to raise awareness, but as more and more information became available about transmission, the Pinkies took on an important role. It was our job to talk about safer sex, and we really tried to bring some joy into it. Lord knows we needed it.
Our next song is all about safe sex. And of course, safe sex these days isn't just a matter of putting the handbrake on. And there's really no excuse for not practicing safe sex, as you've got condoms and dental dams, and now we've even got femidoms, which apart from being great for safe sex are marvellous if you're moving house. Now, my boyfriend and I, we use a lot of condoms because we make love nearly every night, nearly every Monday, nearly every Tuesday. I don't know why they're laughing. And we always get our dental dams and our condoms from Marks and Spencer, because if they don't fit, you can always take them back. Anyway, the rest of my safe sex lesson, well, it's in the song.
Wear a condom, 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 use a chop.
Body rubbing, 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 rub that body. Do it yourself, 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 DIY. Imagination, 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 body shopping, body shopping, body shopping, body shopping, rub that. Say for safer sex, please.
And as well as spreading the message about safer sex, some of the Pink Singers were also practicing it. Rosa remembers talking to a fellow Pinky.
One day I noticed that people were chatting about a party, and I heard Jack's name, and I thought, oh, Jack, they're all going to Jack's party. Well, how come I haven't been invited? So I said, hey, I hear you guys are all going to a party, Jack's party. I didn't get invited. And he said, Rosa, it's a jack-off party. And I said, I still didn't realise. I said, what's that? And he said, Rosa, we all stand around in a circle with trainers on, and we jack off onto black plastic bags. I said, okay, I don't want to come to that party. I thought it was a party for some guy called Jack. I was wondering why I didn't get an invite. So, yeah, I didn't go to that party.
When I look back on those days, it really was absolutely dreadful. And it's a terrible, painful reality that we've lost a whole generation of people, like my friend Paul, Rosa's friend Adrian, and our beloved Pinkies, Gerard, Vaughan, Brian and Steve. They should be still around to tell their own stories. But something I'll never forget is the way the women in our community rose in support and solidarity. Many lesbians and gay men hadn't been mixing much. They had their own networks, went to different pubs, and sometimes even lived in separatist housing. But throughout the AIDS epidemic, the women really helped us, and we worked together. Women volunteered as buddies for patients on the wards. They ran projects like Food Chain, and they volunteered to hand out condoms in clubs. Before this, the choir had been quite separate too. There had been women in the choir to start with, like Jackie Quinnell from episode 1, but as the years progressed, women dropped off one by one, and it had become a gay men's choir. By 1989, the Pink Singers wanted this to change.
The choir, what do you require? Because you've got about 12 people here. You could do with more, I suppose, couldn't you?
We can always do with more men and women singers, but we would like some more lesbians to join us. Our 3 lesbian singers that were with us at the festival have left to go to New Zealand, round Europe and stay in Germany, so we are looking for more women.
Sing It Pink, the story of the Pink Singers, is an Aunt Nell production. It was made possible by the National Lottery Heritage Fund. The presenter of episode 2 was Philip Rescorla. The producer was Rachel Byrne. The assistant producer was Marnie Woodmeade. The executive producers were Tash Walker and Adam Zmith. The executive producer for the Pink Singers was Chris Scales. The archive was voiced by Annie Ring and Will Paxton. Audio mix was by David Pye. Special thanks to Mark Bunyan, Rosa McCormack, Michael Derrick, Mike Thorne, Capital Gay, Bishopsgate Institute Special Collections and Archives, the Pink Singers, and Acast Studios.